Bill O'Reilly has resumed telling you what you can and cannot think and what you can and cannot watch. Our number one story in the countdown, angry at MSNBC as usual over personal things like him getting thrown out of a baseball team's clubhouse the other day because he didn't have the right credentials, but I did. Bill O has again tried to pretend that he's taking some kind of high moral stance in ripping NBC. He is not, unless he really thinks propaganda and lying to the public and censoring the news comprise a high moral stance. Oh, and don't forget the secular progressive outrage that is an epidemic of attacks on Americans by bears.
All three network newscasts reported 7 Afghan children were killed in fighting between the Taliban and U.S. forces. ABC News spent 15 seconds on the story. Just told you about it. CBS News, 10 seconds. But NBC News gave it a full 2 minutes. Dead Afghan kids killed in an American airstrike. NBC News is jazzed.
He also explained that he brings his listeners and viewers stuff that is new, stuff that is relevant to your life. We decided to give you a brief sample of the stuff Bill O and Fox Noise have recently decided are more relevant to your life than the horrors and realities of war. And all of these are from the past week.
Caution, you are about to enter the no-spin zone. We bring you stuff that is new, that is relevant to your life. Next, gold medal Olympic swimmer Amanda Beard, who is undraped in Playboy this month.
And I'm not going to cover every bomb that goes off into crit, because it's meaningless.
My Resolve Problem segment tonight, the increasing problems with bears.
On my program, I don't do a lot of Iraq reporting because we don't know what's happening.
Plenty more ahead as the factor moves along this evening. Big rock and roll controversy. Who is blocking the Monkees from being in the Rock Hall of Fame? What do you learn about a terror bombing in Baghdad every day?
Our body language expert will analyze the latest Rosie O'Donnell internet poster.
You get a lot of bang bang for the sake of bang bang, okay? No context, burning stuff when we come right back. Having sex in your sleep. Is that a legitimate defense against rape charges or total BS? We're trying to do the facts. And there's nothing to be learned from another explosion.
Which performer did not appear with Burt Reynolds in the Smokey and the Bandit movies? Did not appear with him, eh, Christopherson?
Please. There's little news value in broadcasting daily bombings. Factor continues 24/7 on BillO'Reilly.com. Best Father's Day stuff. Spin stops your pen. Dad wants it. The folks know news when they see it.
We didn't even include tonight's loop of supposed Paris Hilton pornography. In a more serious aspect to all this, Bill O also got the Second World War wrong again. You will remember his insistence that the slaughtered American prisoners at Malmedy at the start of the Battle of the Bulge were actually war criminals who had murdered German prisoners. Now to rationalize criticizing actual news organizations for showing actual news, he's bulldozed over the facts of the greatest generation yet again. What about President Roosevelt setting up the Office of War Information in 1942? He asked, which censored, among other things, the results of enemy action and American casualty lists. Roosevelt did that to prevent the erosion of morale here in America. Actually, the OWI, under the leadership of a very liberal former CBS newsman named Elmer Davis, was responsible not for censorship, but for patriotic posters and radio broadcasts and warnings to the public about accidental revelation of war secrets. Loose lips sink ships, and eventually it created the Voice of America. Censorship, the decision not to show the results of enemy action like American dead, was actually discontinued during the Second World War when President Roosevelt himself decided that keeping such information secret was keeping Americans at home from realizing how serious, how vital the war was, that censorship was eroding morale here in America. Famously, Roosevelt personally then lifted the ban on publishing photographs of dead American servicemen, and Life magazine printed an astounding photo, the first of U.S. casualties engulfed in the sands and maggots of the beaches at Buna, New Guinea. So, Bill O'Reilly's reporting lives up to its usual 27% standards. Joined now by the founder and editor of the Huffington Post, Arianna Huffington. Thanks for your time tonight, Arianna.
Thank you, Keith.
So, O'Reilly is presented with the fact that MSNBC and CNN have covered the Iraq War 3 times more frequently than Fox News of late, and goes on the offensive with these premises that mere knowledge of a terrorist bombing helps the terrorists, and so MSNBC and CNN are by definition liberal, if not traitorous. And he twists what FDR did 65 years ago, because FDR found out that if you keep the awful truth from the American public, it would make them apathetic and unwilling to sacrifice. This is some pretty intricate propaganda this time from this guy, is it not?
Well, it's actually the height of irrationality and hypocrisy, and it's a kind of new low at the same time in Bill O'Reilly's way of arguing. And also, it's the height of kind of soullessness. You touched on that, because to call bombs that kill real people meaningless, while he's spending the kind of time he's spending on whether you're having sex in your sleep and whether you are, before this week, we had endless reports on Anna Nicole Smith, who the father of her baby was, on Paris Hilton. So it doesn't make any sense, except that Bill O'Reilly has decided that a good offense is the best defense.
And there was a complaint in here about reporting bombings without context. That's the one kind of issue in there that might have an actual intelligent conversation if you had another intelligent person involved in the conversation besides him. But he gripes about NBC News and presumably other news organizations devoting actual time, 2 minutes in this case, to the children killed in Afghanistan. But a 2-minute report is exactly what gave it context. So now he's going after the coverage from another set of contradictory angles, isn't he?
Well, he is, but the ultimate contradiction for me is when Bill O'Reilly again and again criticizes those of us who are opposed to the war as being unpatriotic and not supporting the troops. But he thinks that he's supporting the troops by ignoring their deaths, by ignoring their ultimate sacrifice. I have no idea how he can justify that. And I wonder, is there anybody holding him accountable? Because if he continues to pretend that he's a journalist, he's basically missing the whole point of journalism, which is to tell the news to the American people and to develop the story as it evolves and as it unfolds. And if that's not journalism, and if that's not what news shows are supposed to do, then I don't know what they're supposed to do except talk about bears and having sex in your sleep.
Well, being threatened by bears. One other thing here that struck me as a fundamental conflict in the positions that he's offered. He says, be afraid of everything because there's terror around the corner, fight in Iraq because there's terror around the corner, the traditional party line from the government. But then he says, don't show the results of the terror. I thought propaganda only worked if you give the message, one message to the victims of propaganda. Is this not even ineffective because he's contradicting himself just on the purely propaganda level?
He's contradicting himself on the purely propaganda level, but that's, of course, what he feels he has to do, because if we go back to the amount of time that Fox and Bill O'Reilly spent on the war when it was going well for the administration, right just about the mission accomplished moment, then we would have a very different argument from him about why they were devoting so much time to the war. So this is purely the fact that the war is not going well, that every day we have more evidence that the escalation has not worked, and that as a result, the only way to stop the American people from being even more opposed to what's happening than they already are is to just withhold the facts from them, to allow them to be in a greater level of denial than they are at the moment.
And the point that Wes Clark made at the beginning of this hour, when people know what's happening in a war, they care, and they care about the people who are fighting the war on their behalf. That seems to have been lost in this equation, too, does it not?
It has, and it's really tragic, because we need to level with the American people from the beginning, from before we invaded Iraq. The problem with this war has been our leaders not leveling with the American people and the American media not leveling with the American people. But this case is a new law. It's a new law, as I said at the beginning, in irrationality. I mean, it's impossible for anybody to try and defend what Bill O'Reilly is saying.
Arianna Huffington, founder of HuffingtonPost.com. As always, great thanks for your time and joining us tonight.
Thank you.